They once called him heartless. They said he was cold, harsh, and even cruel. But the truth is very different. Behind the sharp words and tough exterior was Simon Cowell, a boy who grew up almost invisible, a young man who didn't crave fame for its own sake, but longed for something much deeper. Recognition. From the quiet neighborhoods of Hertfordshire to the bright, unrelenting spotlight of American Idol. Simon's journey wasn't smooth or privileged. It was carved out of hardship, rejection, humiliation, and a hunger so powerful that eventually the world had no choice but to take notice. Simon was not the golden boy in his family or at school. Teachers overlooked him, classmates ignored him, and at home, he was always reaching for his father's approval. But he never heard those simple words that every child longs for. "I'm proud of you." That silence became a wound, one that shaped every decision he made. By the time he was in his late teens, Simon found himself working in the mailroom of EMI, a major music company. His job was simple, delivering letters and running errands for artists whose names filled stadiums, while his own name meant nothing at all. He was invisible, forgotten, and frustrated. He eventually quit in embarrassment, only to return when the outside world proved even harsher. Simon would later admit that in those days, he sometimes cried in the bathroom after work. Not because he had failed, but because he feared that his life had already reached its peak at such a young age. But rather than breaking him, those painful moments built him. Rejection became his teacher. Humiliation became his motivation. And the boy who once went unnoticed was preparing to rewrite the rules of modern entertainment. Simon's first attempt at running a record label started with promise, but ended in disaster. The company collapsed, leaving him broke, humiliated, and forced to move back into his childhood bedroom. For most people, that would have been the end of the story, but Simon wasn't ready to give up. Instead of focusing only on music, he began studying something bigger: the mechanics of fame itself. He asked questions no one else seemed to care about. What makes people cheer? What makes them remember a song or a performer? What makes audiences connect? His answers came in the form of risk-taking. He began signing groups that no one else wanted, bands that critics laughed at but fans adored. While others chased respect, Simon chased connection. That connection turned into millions of records sold, and suddenly the man once ignored was starting to build momentum. Nothing, however, prepared him for what would happen in 2001. When Simon appeared on television with Pop Idol, everything changed. His brutal honesty and uncomfortable silences were not cruelty, they were honesty. And the world couldn't turn away. Within a few short years, American Idol, The X Factor, and Got Talent became global sensations. His name was stamped on shows watched by over 600 million people in more than 100 countries. Practically overnight, Simon Cowell went from mailroom worker to the most powerful man in television. But here's the twist. While Simon was busy turning ordinary people into stars and making countless dreams come true, he found himself haunted by his own shadows. Fame gave him fortune, but it also left him lonely. Behind the applause and the cameras, he admitted that even in the middle of standing ovations, he often felt completely alone. Simon's story is not really about cruelty. It's about survival, about a boy who was invisible, who used rejection as fuel, and who built an empire the world could not ignore. But even empires face storms. In 2013, the news broke that Simon was expecting a child with Lauren Silverman, the wife of his close friend Andrew. It wasn't just gossip, it was a firestorm. Headlines screamed betrayal. Tabloids tore apart every detail. The man who had spent years judging others was suddenly judged by the entire world. Friends walked away. Trust was broken. Andrew filed for divorce. And for the first time in his career, Simon admitted quietly, "It's not something I'm proud of." For once, he had no control, no clever spin, no escape. And yet, from that scandal came salvation. In February 2014, Simon held his newborn son, Eric, for the first time. Cameras caught his smile, but what they didn't capture was the storm that little boy silenced. Because just months earlier, Simon's world had collapsed under the weight of judgment. Eric's arrival gave him something he had never truly had. Before purpose. From that moment on, his priorities shifted. Life was no longer about ratings, contracts, or magazine covers. It was about bedtime stories, Lego towers, and laughter with his son. Those close to him noticed the change immediately. The sharp edges softened, the relentless work slowed. Fatherhood didn't erase the scandal, but it gave it meaning. A different Simon began to emerge, but redemption often comes with scars. In 2015, just as Simon was finding his footing as a father, life delivered another blow: the loss of his mother, Julie. She was 89, graceful, and the quiet anchor during Simon's turbulent youth. Her passing devastated him. He stepped away from the X Factor for a time and admitted, "Losing my mom was the hardest thing I've ever gone through." It reopened an old wound: the loss of his father in 1999. The man whose approval Simon had chased his entire life never lived to see his son reach global fame. With both parents gone, Simon felt untethered, as though the last thread to his roots had been cut. And then, in 2020, fate struck harder. Simon was testing an electric bike in his Malibu courtyard when a single miscalculation shattered his back. After 6 hours of surgery, a steel rod was placed in his spine. Doctors warned that one wrong move could mean he might never walk again. For a man defined by control, the irony was crushing. He couldn't even lift a glass of water. He later admitted, "I came within a minute of not making it." The nights were endless battles against pain. But his greatest fear wasn't death, it was leaving Eric without a father. That thought kept him fighting. Step by step, with Eric cheering him on, Simon slowly rebuilt his strength. But just as recovery gave him hope, disaster struck again. In 2022, he suffered another bike accident, breaking his arm and bruising his face. The headlines mocked him as reckless, fragile, even foolish. The physical pain was bad, but the humiliation cut deeper. Twice the untouchable Mobile was reminded he was human, fragile, breakable, and then came another scar, not on his body, but on his face. Years of cosmetic treatments, Botox, and fillers led to a transformation that shocked fans. By 2021, Simon looked almost unrecognizable. His famous smirk seemed stiff, his cheeks swollen, his face frozen. Memes mocked him. Headlines asked, "What happened to Simon Cowell?" For the first time, Simon admitted, "I went too far. I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself." This wasn't just regret about cosmetic choices, it was an identity crisis. The man who had fought so hard to be seen now faced the nightmare of not even recognizing himself. Slowly, he withdrew from public life. Fewer TV appearances, fewer interviews. Instead of talking about ratings, he talked about Eric. And in one quiet statement, he said it all. "I don't need to be everywhere anymore. I just want to be there when Eric laughs." Simon's story, at its heart, is not about money, fame, or power. It is about scars, some hidden, some carved into his spine, and some etched onto his very face. But through every fall, one truth has remained: even legends stumble, and sometimes it is in those stumbles that we finally see the human being behind the empire. Still, the scrutiny never stopped. Paparazzi followed him through Malibu. Tabloids speculated about procedures that never happened. Every rare appearance became front-page news. But something far more devastating was waiting. In September 2024, tragedy struck. Liam Payne, just 31 years old, died suddenly after falling from a hotel balcony in Buenos Aires. For Simon, the loss was devastating. Liam was not just another contestant, he was family. Simon had placed him in One Direction, the group that went on to define a generation. Simon remembered Liam's first audition, the nervous laugh, the determination in his eyes. A simple yes had opened a future that seemed destined to last. for decades, and now, in a single moment, that future was gone. Simon lost his father in 1999, his mother in 2015, his own near-fatal accident in 2020. But Liam's death was different. It was unnatural, merciless. To lose someone so young, it's too cruel, Simon whispered to a friend. While the world mourned with songs and vigils, Simon mourned in silence. He held Eric tighter. Old audition tapes became painful rituals. Liam's laughter, his early songs, now ghosts on a screen. Simon could build empires. He could create stars, but he could not rewrite this ending. By 2025, at 65 years old, Simon Cowell is not the ruthless judge who once dominated Saturday nights. He is a man reshaped by scars, survival, and reflection. His empire still thrives. Got Talent, The X Factor, a fortune worth hundreds of millions. But wealth no longer defines him. He has already written his will. Eric will not inherit billions. Instead, the money will go to children's hospitals, scholarships, and creative education. I don't want Eric to inherit money, Simon has said. I want him to inherit values. Even his appearance tells a story now. No more Botox, no more masks, just the natural lines of age, the gray hair, and the honesty of someone at peace. He once chased youth. Now he chases memories with his son. The struggles remain. His back is stiff in the mornings. His eyesight grows weaker under stage lights. He fears another fall. But every evening, life softens again. Bike rides with Eric, piano keys, bedtime stories read slowly but with love. And perhaps this is Simon Cowell's real legacy. Not the empires, not the ratings, not the fame, but the ordinary victories. A father's presence, a survivor's endurance, a philanthropist's purpose. His story carries a lesson for all of us. Wealth fades, fame disappears, health declines, but love, humility, and purpose endure. Simon Cowell has shown that true legacy is not about empire, it's about empathy. Not about flawless success, but about the courage to keep going even when broken.